relax through this process. Try to have fun. Get to know your admissions officers. We're real people. You can see Alice and I, we're friendly. We want to get to know you. And so try to remind yourself to take a deep breath once in a while and just enjoy. So I'm going to share my screen. And this was taken a few years ago, but it just reminds me of what I'm missing. I sorely miss going to your beautiful country. My husband goes with me once in a while when I go to India. I have such great memories, and hopefully soon I will be back. So I've been asked to talk about testing. SAT, ACT specifically, but I'm going to talk about other tests as well and what we do with those tests. So the SAT, ACT are just one piece of a holistic review process. Universities may use it because it is a standard measure. It helps us compare students from different school systems. Even within Indian boards, it gives us another measure to look at, comparing students from different regions. And I will repeat twice more, just one piece of the holistic review process. What are the drawbacks? I personally feel like the SAT and ACT, they're just not as good of predictors of success as your grades in school are and your board exams. There's not as much test prep in your area as there is in the US. So you are at a little bit of a disadvantage there. I know that, you also have the pressure of studying for your Indian boards at the same time you're studying for SAT and ACT, and that does get stressful. And of course, this year, last year, there have been many issues with access, that. So you hear about test optional, test flexible, test blind. A lot of universities this past year and a half have gone test optional or test flexible because of access issues. And let me point out that when you hear the term test optional, generally speaking, that's very US centric. And it really is referring to the SAT and ACT for the most part. That's when you hear it, in the news or on a university website. When they say test optional, they really mean SAT, ACT optional. Okay, and I'm going to talk about English proficiency separately. So again, a lot of us are SAT, ACT optional, especially now. Unfortunately, there's not a standard, policy that US universities have. So each one of us makes our own policies regarding this. So you really do just have to check websites, go to the admissions websites, look at the application checklist. Usually those are pretty easy to find. We have, I know on our application, there's a question that one of the very first questions is, do you want us to consider your SAT or ACT? Yes or no. If you answer that no, then we truly will not use your score. And because sometimes students have already submitted the scores to us before they apply, then they say, no, I don't want you to consider my tests. And in that case, for TCU anyway, your scores are suppressed, so we can't even see them when we're reading your application. Some universities, though, will use the SAT if you submit it, even if they are test optional. So I know a lot of times students ask me, should I submit my score or should I not, because you're test optional? And I usually say, look at the university websites. If they quote, middle 50% scoring ranges on the SAT, ACT, if you're at the top end of that or above that, maybe you do want to submit it. But if you're just kind of in the middle or the low end, it may, it probably won't help you any. My university, we use the term do no harm policy. And what that means is if you submit the scores and we're reviewing your application, if we think that score is going to help you, maybe it will bump you over to being admitted. Maybe you're kind of borderline, but then that SAT is really good, then we will use it. If you're borderline, we look at the test score and it's going to hurt you. It might bump you down to being deferred, or maybe it bumps you out of the scholarship range. Then we don't use it. So again, we call that, a do no harm policy. If it helps, we use it. Let's see, that's test optional. Now, you hear about test flexible as well. Again, that's referring to the SAT or ACT. When a university is test flexible, that means that they'll allow you to submit any number of things. Maybe an English test, maybe if you're in a school that does the IB or AP, or maybe it's, Indian boards. I mean, it could be anything. But so test flexible, it means, they need something, but it doesn't have to be the SAT, ACT. And again, the universities really they spell these out pretty clearly on their websites. But then I still get people saying, well, you said you're test optional, but are you really test optional? Sometimes you'll find universities that are test optional for admission, but they like it for scholarships. Some are optional, test optional, depending on the type of curriculum you're in or your native language. A lot of universities for many years have been test optional, SAT, ACT optional for international students. I've been hearing that for years as I've been traveling and, standing next to my colleagues from other universities at college fairs. They'll say, well, for international students, you don't have to take the SAT, ACT. So let's talk about English proficiency, because again, at TCU, we're SAT, ACT optional, but we still need some kind of English proficiency. And that could be from your SAT, ACT, or one of these other tests. And these are the three most common English tests. The TOEFL was kind of the original. A lot of people in India take the IELTS. And then there's another one, the Duolingo English test, that's becoming very common, very popular, especially these last couple of years, because Duolingo has always been online. You can take it whenever you want. So, there's not this registration period. You have to register, 2 months in advance, and then you have to go to a testing center. That's how it may be for TOEFL and IELTS, but Duolingo's always been online. So there's really no reason you can't take it, as long as you can have good internet connectivity. Even if it's not at your home, if you can take it at school or somewhere else. My university, and again, I'm just using TCU as an example, we also will, another way you can show your English proficiency is if English is your native language, of course, or if you've been in a high school for at least 3 years where English is the language of instruction. And so I know that's the case for a lot of schools there in India. So again, and that's not an uncommon policy. So you might, ask universities, because, sometimes, there's an automatic checklist item that says, you have to take an English test, you have to take a TOEFL, but sometimes you have to dig a little deeper and find out, are there exceptions to that? Okay. And again, can English proficiency be waived? That's, as I was saying before, it's very specific to each university rather. I have heard, and Devika, you might know this as well from feedback from your students. I've heard some students saying that the U.S. Embassy asks about English tests. They want to make sure they're proficient. I see you shaking your head. So I do think it's a good idea to take one of these tests. Even if your top university doesn't require it, I still think it's a good idea. But ask Next Genius staff, ask us admissions officers. We like to get to know you, answer your questions. And that's, I'm going to stop right here so we can leave plenty of time for Q&A. And